And welcome back to my channel for another PyQt5 tutorial video. So this video is actually a PyQt5 crash course into the most basic elements in PyQt5, so how to build a basic graphical user interface with Python and PyQt5. Now, how does this really work? Now, you can probably tell that the graphical user interface that you can see at the moment isn't really the most attractive one. So it does look very bare, it's missing probably a lot, and it's sort of messy. So that's something to keep in mind. But like I said, this is something for beginners. We can later on choose to style this further, make it a bit more complex, and obviously build a real-world application with a PyQt5 graphical user interface. But for now, this crash course will cover the following basic elements. The first element that we're going to cover is actually a label. So a label is, as you can see here, some static text. So you have here, create your profile, first name, last name. Even this one says label. So this is just text that you have on the screen. It doesn't really change. You can't really edit it. Not through the interface. You cannot. So you can through the code, obviously. So that's the first labels. The next one is text edits. So text edits or text boxes or text fields. So depending on the language or framework that you're using, this has different names. But it's basically this box that you can type stuff into. So now I have the first name. I also have, the last name. And yeah, we can actually type stuff into these boxes. So these boxes will take some text and store it in them. We can also make these boxes to be read-only. That means they're not editable. And we can also sort of disable them. Now, what else can we do? So we said labels and text boxes. The next thing we're going to cover is actually spin boxes. So spin boxes are this thing you see right here. They store integers or numbers. Numbers actually doesn't have to be integers. And they just, go up and down depending on a certain step size. So here our step size is 1. And we have set the maximum to be 5 and the minimum to be 1. And we can see here that every time the value is changing, the console is printing out current value and the actual value. So here we can see the current value is 1. If I change this to 2, it's obviously 2 now. So this is what a spin box looks like. You can set the minimum, the maximum, and a somewhat reaction whenever something is changed. So whenever the value is changed. Now, the fourth element we're going to cover is a checkbox. You can see here we have this employed checkbox, and here we have occupation, which is sort of blank. So there's nothing going on here. There's nowhere to type in your occupation. Now, if we do check employed, we can see here that we have now a combo box. Now, this is the next element that we're going to discuss. A combo box is sort of this drop-down that you have where you can select one of many things, one of many items, you could say. And if I uncheck employed, you can see the occupation box disappears. Check it, it's back. Uncheck it, it's gone again. Now, if I do keep it checked, this is a combo box, and I said we're going to cover this as well. So if I change one of these, I can see doctor selected. Product manager selected. Now, obviously, these should be made much bigger so that you can actually see the words, but you get the point. We're altering this label that we have here, this static text, depending on what we're selecting in the combo box. Now, if this is confusing, no worries, because we're going to code all of these step by step, and we're going to go through them in this video. Now, the next thing that we're going to cover, and this is actually the last one, so following labels, text edits, spin boxes, check boxes, combo boxes, tons of boxes, we're going to cover buttons. Now, if I do press this button, we can see that it disables the first name and the last name. So here it disabled, the first name and last name field. So we can't really type anything anymore. They're all grayed out. And it prints a value here. So it prints the first name, last name is employed. And if employed hasn't been checked, it would have printed is not employed. So these are the elements we're going to cover. This is the sort of basic graphical user interface that we're going to be building. Now, stay tuned. In this video, we're actually going to build it together and code all of these things. So let's see. Because you are actually beginners, it's worth mentioning that PyQt5 is a Python graphical user interface library. You may already know that, but it's just something worth mentioning. To install PyQt5, all you need to do is actually go to your terminal and then just pip install PyQt5. Obviously, I have it, so it's going to tell me requirement is already satisfied. On the other hand, to use something called QtDesigner, and let's first explore what QtDesigner is, and then I'll tell you how to install it. If this is a bit confusing, I do have a separate short video on simply how to set up PyQt5 as well as setting up the designer and really getting started with working with them. So what is QtDesigner? QtDesigner is this tool right here. So it is a drag and drop tool, you can see right here, that enables us to design our graphical user interface using a simple drag and drop functionality. Meaning, if I want to suddenly add another button here, I can just drag one onto my screen and now I should have a button here. If I want to add a checkbox, I can add a checkbox here. And this is a very convenient way for us to actually be able to really do these different things. So it makes the process of building graphical user interfaces super fast and super intuitive that you don't need to manually code all of these things, especially if you have a very huge UI. Now, how does this really save them? It saves these files as .ui files. So you can see here qtcrashcourse.ui. These .ui files should be added into your PyCharm project or into the same folder if you're using a standard text editor and not PyCharm. So you add these into the same folder. Once these are in the same folder, you can actually load them through a specific function that we're going to explore in a second. And once you load them, these elements become part of the code. The .ui files are actually XML files. So if I do open this, and here you go. So they're actually XML files. So the reason that took forever is somehow PyCharm doesn't really support them, but it's worth mentioning that you can edit them from here, you can change the XML files, and this is really the actual interface that we are using. So enough about that, let me just go back to the PyCharm project. So after this, how does this work? How do we load this UI that we're designing in drag and drop? How do we load it into our PyCharm project? So the way you can actually load it is simply with this function right here, although it's not as easy as it sounds. First things first, to actually use QtDesigner and use all of this drag and drop functionality and exploit its many benefits, what you need to do is actually install it, and it doesn't get installed with PyQt5 on its own, so this is a common misconception. What you need to do is pip install PyQt5-tools, and QtDesigner is actually one of those tools, and you can see requirement already satisfied. In your case, you'd wait a couple minutes. Once it downloads, you're good to go. Okay, now we have it actually downloaded. What do I have here? So let me just hide this part of the code for now, and let's just focus on here. So here we have our imports. So these are the imports you're going to need regardless of your PyQt5 application. So you're going to need the widgets, obviously, so the different elements that you have in your user interface. You're going to need a Q dialog, so this will be what you open up to actually launch your application. You're going to need a Q application, so this is the actual application that we're launching. And you're going to need to import your system just to actually be able to execute and run this application. Another thing you need is this. So from PyQt5.uic, import load.ui. Load.ui is actually a function that we're going to use here, and we use it to simply load UI, give it the name of the UI. So here it would be qtcrashcourse.ui. So this is the UI here, and self. Once we do that, we're able to actually load the UI into a class. So this is why we use the class main window. And then we actually simply define a constructor. And in the constructor, we load the UI. Why do we use classes? You have to use a class for every different UI you have in PyQt5, because these different elements, the buttons, the labels, the text fields, they become actual variables or attributes for this specific class. So later on, you can actually refer to this checkbox as self.checkbox. So you would do this, and we're going to see that in a minute, so don't worry about that. But this, you can see here that there is actually no variable called checkbox. But once you load this UI, you actually create multiple variables. So that's really it for loading the UI. Now, the other part here, you can see it's commented with main. This is actually the main part of the application. So we're done with defining our classes. How do I run it? You create a Q application. A Q application is basically an application using PyQt5. Then what you need to do is actually you create a widget, and this widget will have to contain the main window. So you create an instance of this class that you have defined above and add it to a stack of widgets. What does this mean? This means that, okay, you have this class. This can have, infinite number of screens with the same layout. You create an instance of it. Once the instance is created, actually, you are able to add this to a widget and then actually show it. So widget.show. Here the fixed height and fixed length, fixed width, are just integers that we choose that, help us, like set the actual fixed height and width for the application without being able to drag it and, mess things up. So I just, change the values. It depends. So whatever you like, whatever you design it to be, you can change these values. Then finally, what you need to do is execute the application, and then if it doesn't work out, you can simply exit the application. So that's really it for running it. Now at this point, if I do press run, what do I get? Basically what I've done so far is I've simply loaded this UI. And no worries, I'll get to designing the UI in a second. So now I'm running it. Here we go, I have the UI, it's open up in front of me, and we can see here that we have all the different elements. Obviously now I can click the button, I can type stuff, I can change stuff here. There is actually no stuff here, and nothing is happening because our code really contains no handlers, nothing whatsoever. So that's really our first starting point. We were able to load the UI, and there's really no code involved yet. So the next steps that we're gonna follow is 1, we're gonna actually design this UI, and 2, we're actually gonna start coding. So let's go back to designing the UI, let's go back to QtDesigner, forget about code for a bit, and see how does this whole thing work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to design a separate UI file in parallel. So let's see. File new. Let's choose dialog without buttons. So here, dialog without buttons. And this means that this is actually just an empty dialog. I can click create and I can see we have an empty dialog here. I can resize this to have almost, the similar size to its parent. And yeah, so this is our current dialog. So I'm just gonna keep this here. And we can choose to save it. Save it in the same place. So let's say Qt crash course 2. Okay, so we're not going to be using this one, but I just want to show it for the sake of demonstration and to show you how actually these UIs are coded. Are designed. So no coding involved here. We can see the background color is a bit different in this case. All you need to do is right click and change style sheet. So don't be scared if you see style sheets. You don't need to be familiar with CSS to be able to do these sort of things. What you need to do is simply just, okay, add color, background color. You want to add color white, you want to add a grayish color, you want to add, whatever color you like. Just make sure it looks, somewhat presentable. So let's say this very pale yellow. That's not maybe presentable at all, but you get the point. And that's really it. You have your background color. So PyQt5 is really intuitive. It really helps you out with the CSS part. If you are interested in more CSS, I have a video specifically on styling PyQt5, stuff. So PyQt5 graphical user interfaces with CSS. Okay, so I have my background color now. It doesn't look the same as this one, but okay. So like we said, our very first thing that we're going to do is called labels. So coming here, we can see these different widgets that we can actually involve in our PyQt5 application. So here we have maybe a label. So yeah, that's really what we need. You can get a combo box from here. You can get a push button from here. So let me just delete these for now. And let's first actually use the labels. So I have a label. It's very tiny, doesn't really contain anything. I can change it to create your profile. So that's really what we're doing, and I can make it bigger. Another thing I can do is actually change the style sheet again. And let's say here I want to add font. Let's keep the same font and maybe make it bigger. 26. You can make it bold if you like. Now you can apply. You can see the label just got much bigger. You can also change the color of the font. So you can make it this dark blue and then you apply. So it doesn't really show here, but yeah, it was just changed. So okay, we have our very first label. Now this label here is static text. Now the user will not be able to change it. Also, if you do want to preview, what you can do is simply press Ctrl+R and you'll be able to preview your design on a normal graphical user interface. So this is how it would look like. So yeah, we have our very first label. Now what we can do again is add another label. So we go back here, we drag another label. And this label, let's say first name. And obviously I also want to make it bigger. It doesn't really look that great. So I'm gonna first add a color. add this maybe brighter blue so that we can actually tell the difference. And then I'm gonna add a font, same font. Let's make it 14, 16, make it bold, and then press apply. So, okay, that looks pretty much like what I have above. And yeah, that is our first label. Now we go here, and the very next thing I'm gonna tell you is this part here. So here, this is the object name. The object name is what the variable inside Python will be called. So now I can call this fname, or let's say first name actually. Okay, so I just called it first name. I can go back to Python here. Let me run this and let's see if the graphical user, okay, I should change this to Qt Crash Course 2. Okay, so now I'm running this, and here you can see that, okay, we just have these two very static labels. And now there's really nothing that can change. So yeah, they exist, they're loaded. Now, why did I call it here first name? So I call this label first name. I want to be able to refer to it through the code. So let's see, self.firstname.setText hello. Okay, so I'm just gonna erase this later, but it's for the sake of demonstration. I'm gonna run it now, and you can see here that in place of first name, you can actually see hello, which means I was able to change the text from this static text label thing and actually change it through my code. So later on, whenever you're actually changing stuff, or you're building this application, let's say your application welcomes a user, and it should say hi username. So let's say hi John, hi Jane, hi Mark. So depending on that, you will be able to change your labels. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Changing a label's text is something that's very possible. So I'm just gonna erase this now because we don't really need it at the moment, but we can refer to this later on. Now that I have first name, it makes sense to just copy paste it and create others. So I'm gonna call this last name. So this is the last name, and what we have before is we have age, occupation, let's see, and this label. And I'm gonna just come here and paste. Okay, so yeah, this should make sense. Okay, so now we have like a somewhat like fine set of labels, and we're just gonna use these to refer to stuff as we use them. So this is how our graphical user interface looks at the moment. Okay, we have labels now. What we need next is actually text fields. So next thing we're gonna add are text fields, or actually, sorry, text edits. So I add a text edit here. It looks like that. Okay, so I can also just create another one. And here we go. Okay, so these are the different text fields. So now if I Control R to preview, I can actually type stuff in here and then type other stuff in here. So these are my text fields. I can also change the font size if you can feel that the font is too small. So let's say add font, same font, just make it, bigger size, apply. Let's copy this as well and apply it in the other text field. So, okay, here we go. Now if we Control R, we can type in, and obviously the text looks much bigger. So this is a text field, and this is how it looks like. It looks fine, right? Okay, for now, we have the text fields and the labels that we have on the screen. Here you can see the object name is TextEdit. Later on in my code, I'd like to differentiate between the first name and the last name text fields. So we can see here, let's call this fname, and let's call this one lname. Sorry, I'm typing, okay, lname. Okay, we're gonna use this to be able to get this in the code. All right, what's next? What's next is we're gonna add a button, and then we're gonna refer to the different types of boxes that we have. But first, let's actually get a button. So here we have push button. It looks very yellow. We can also right click, change the style sheet again. You can change the background color, make it a dark blue, apply. Obviously changing the font color would be a good idea. So let's make this one white. And also apply. We can change the font. Let's make this bigger as well, just like big enough. And apply. Okay, so now we can also make this bigger. And here we go. So we have a button. Control R, you can preview this, and everything looks solid for now. Okay, so this is what I have. Let's say my first goal at this moment is to exploit what I have so far. So let's just forget about the spin box, the combo box, the check box. I want to exploit what I have right now and really just whenever I press on the button, print out the first name and the last name, separated by a space. That's our first goal, okay? If you're interested in this being more interactive, you feel free to pause and try to code this yourself. But otherwise, let's just go ahead. Okay, so this is my button. The actual object name is push button, so let's just call it button. Okay, let's go back to the code. So we said to refer to elements in our code, all we need to do is self.objectName, so self.button. How will I say that whenever you are clicked, this is my goal. When the button is clicked, do this, print the name and the last name. When button is clicked, how do I say that in the code? I say self.button.clicked.connect, okay? And then I would just write in the name of any function here. So self.button.clicked. And what is this button clicked? It's a function I'm going to define myself. So button clicked, and here you go, okay? And here we're going to just print stuff. So what happened now? I just told it that when the self.button thingy, when this variable, when this object is clicked, connect it to this function, the function being self.buttonClicked. And this is the function here. And what it's going to do, let's say here, let's first make it print hello. Okay? Let's forget about all the other stuff. So let's see, push button. We're pushing it, and it's printing hello every single time. So pushing it again, it's printing hello every single time. So what's happening, it's connecting to self.buttonClicked, going to print hello, and this is the task that's being accomplished. Okay, that's my very first thing. Let me create an output string. Okay? First, it's empty, and what I'm going to print is actually the output string itself. I want the output string to actually take the values from the very first text edit and the very next text edit and actually print them out. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say self.fname, that's what we called it, to plain text. So that's how you get the text from a text edit, plus a space bar, plus self.lname.toPlain text, right? Okay, and now I'm gonna run this again. So let's see, I'm gonna say John, and here I'm gonna say Smith, and then I'm gonna push the button, and it will print out John Smith. So self.fname.toPlainText takes the text from the actual text edit and puts it in the output string. So this is what we're doing. Okay, this is a good idea. Now what if every time I press this button, I don't want to make this editable again? So okay, you know what, the guy decided his name is John Smith, I don't want him to change it. I want to disable this. So similar to what I showed you before. Here's what you can do. So let's see, self.fname.setReadOnly, and I'm gonna set it to be true. By default, it's false, meaning it's not read-only. And I'm going to do the same for lname. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just gonna self.fname.setDisabled to true. And then self.fname.setDisabled to true. Okay, this should be lname. Alright, so what am I doing now? I'm disabling it after the button is clicked. So I'm not allowing the user to type after, they press confirm, they're done. Okay, so let's see, John Smith, and let's see, okay, we confirmed. It's gray now, we can't edit it anymore. It's gray, it's done, okay, you made a decision, you can't go back now. That's really what we just decided for the user. So that's another attribute we have for these different text edits. So my goal out of this is to show you what? There are so many properties for each of these widgets. So for a label, for a box, for a text box, text edit, button, there are so many different properties. So here, we just set disabled, set read only, and we get the text. So there are infinitely many functions, and I wish I can cover them all. I'm trying to cover, the relevant, the interesting ones, but this is just something for you to keep in mind to see the possibilities are actually endless. Okay, so now we covered this part. So let's say for now we're done with the text edits and we're done with the push button actually, for now. let's move on to something different. So let's go back to our QtDesigner and see what we're going to do. Here we actually have a checkbox, yes. So let's copy it and paste it here. Let me drag it here. Okay, so what is this checkbox? A checkbox is basically just, the thing that you can check or uncheck. So I'm just gonna Control R to preview again. And yeah, it can either have a check mark or not. Okay, now what happens next? What's gonna happen next is the following. So okay, I added the checkbox. The object name is checkbox. And what I want is to print something whenever the checkbox is changed. So I go back to the code, and let's say here I'll add a section for the checkbox. So let's see, self.checkbox.state.changed.connect. And what I'm going to do is create another function called checked. Okay, so whenever the state is changed, meaning it's either checked when it wasn't before, or it got unchecked because it already was, in this case, I will go to a function called checked. Okay, and I'm gonna define this function myself. So I'm gonna say is checked plus str self.checkbox.is_checked, and we're gonna see what this function does here. So now I'm gonna run this. Okay, so I have here, like, I don't even need to demo this. I check the box, is checked is true. I uncheck it, is checked is false. So this is a Boolean value that's being returned. Okay, so I can use this Boolean value to perform other things depending on whether or not the checkbox is actually checked. So we said before, we actually want to add a combo box. So let's go back here to QtDesigner and add a combo box. So a combo box can be gotten from here, so you can actually get a combo box from here. Again, you can make this bigger and look better. So it follows the same logic. You can again change the style sheet, change the font, make it a bit bigger, and yeah. So there is one thing I want to talk about related to combo boxes. If you double click on a combo box, you can actually add elements. So let's say item 1, and let's add item 2. And so on. So, okay, we have these different elements that we just added. Now, what if I want to actually add this through code? And you definitely can, and you definitely should, because in some cases you're getting this information from a database. You're not necessarily having it predefined. The things might vary, they might be different. So now here you can see, okay, I just did not save this. Okay, let me run this. So yeah, you can see item 1, item 2. Okay, like I said, we want to change this to be more, added through the code. How can we do this? Okay, let's see. So we're gonna create another section here for our combo box. Okay, so self.ComboBox, is that what it's called? Let's check. So here we can see ComboBox is the name. So self.ComboBox.add item, and here I can add the item hi. And I'm just, trying things out just to show you. And you can see here that we have a third item, hi. Okay, so let's go back. Let's, delete these items that we've already created and, add more solid occupations. What we can do is create a list. So list occupations, and we're going to say engineer, doctor, and manager. Okay, and what we're going to do is for job in list awk self.combobox.addItem job. So you can add strings and they will be different items in the combo box. So let's run it again. And you can see here we have engineer, doctor, manager. Okay, so for now, let's sort of keep this. So let's actually finish up the combo box and change the label accordingly. And then we'll see how to make it disappear, whether or not the employed is actually checked. Okay, so how am I going to change this label depending on what is selected here? So we actually explored this earlier in the video. So we can use setText. So what we're going to do is actually have another function here. So we're going to say self.ComboBox. value changed dot connect, and in this case we're gonna connect it to combo changed, which is another function that we have defined. So we'll come here, we'll define a new function. So let's see, def combo changed self, and we're gonna create this function. And for now, what we're gonna do is, let's say, print value changed. Okay, just to verify that everything is working. So now, okay, so obviously I messed something up. So self.combobox.value changed. Yeah, okay, actually this is for the spin box. So let's see, this should be current index changed. Okay, so sorry for that. Now we can run this. And here, if I actually change the index, so you can see here, okay, value changed. I change it to manager, value changed. If I keep manager itself, the value is not changed, nothing will happen. Engineer, value changed. Okay, so we're actually printing now. We said we want to actually change the label. So going back to designer, this label has a name, output label. So we're gonna go to the code, and let's see, self.outputLabel.set text. And now we're gonna set this text to be the following. So we're gonna set it to self.combobox.current.text. So this is actually the attribute we use to get the current text from the combo box. Space is selected. And this reminds me to actually make this label bigger so that we can actually see everything. And now, let's run it. So, okay, engineer. Okay, so that wasn't actually changed. So, okay, manager is selected, doctor is selected, engineer is selected, and you can see it's changing depending on how we change the combo box. So this is another attribute we have for the combo box. We can you know, whenever the current index is changed, we can get the current text, and we can also use it to set a label. Okay, great. What's the next thing that we're going to do? The next thing we're going to do, we said that whenever we want employed to be unchecked, we don't want to see this combo box. Like we already told the application, I'm not employed. So please do not actually show me the combo box. Okay, how are we going to do this? So the first thing we're going to do to make sure it does disappear on startup, because as soon as we launch the application, employed is unchecked, is we're going to set it to not be visible. So self.combobox.setVisible to false. Sorry, okay. So the visible is false. Now if I run it, okay, it's not here. You can't see the combo box even though it does exist in our code. What we want is when the checkbox is checked, so the state changed, we go to checked. Now we were printing is checked. So I'm going to take this part here, check whether it's checked. Okay, that's a mouthful. Okay, so if self.combobox is checked, so it's checked, I am employed. Okay, so self.combobox.setVisible to be true. Else, if it's not checked, self.combobox.setVisible to be false. So now if we run this, okay, employed is unchecked, I can't see the occupation. I check employed. Here we go. So now I can see it, I can change it, and this will change the labels. And let's see, I decided I'm not employed. So I uncheck it and it's gone. And I check it back and it's back again. So what's happening is every time the state is changed for the checkbox, it's connecting me to self.checked. And what checked is doing, it checks if the checkbox is checked. And it will set visible if it is. So it will actually show us the occupations. Otherwise, it will not set it to visible. It will keep it to be invisible. So that's really how we're connecting everything together. For now, what we've done is we've covered the checkbox and the buttons and the labels and the text edits and the combo box. Another thing we had in the earlier part that I showed you in the very first part of the video is when we do press the button, it prints the first name, last name, plus whether or not they are employed. So what we can do here is if self.checkbox is checked again, so we're checking if they are actually employed. Output string is equal to output string, so we're concatenating to it, plus space is employed, else, okay, we're gonna make them to be not employed. So we're gonna go down and let's say it's not employed. Okay, And in this case, we're going to print the output string. So now I'm going to run this again. So let's keep them not employed. Let's say John, and his last name is just S. So I push the button. Okay, I didn't push it. Here we go. So John S is not employed. And we can see that they got disabled just like how we defined them earlier on. Okay, now if I do check it, you can see the occupation shows up back here and the doctor is selected. Okay, so that's it for the first four different elements. So for the label, the text edit, the button, the combo box, and the checkbox. So yes, 5. The final one is actually the spin box. So let's go back to Designer. Let's see. So the spin box is here. So the spin box is from here. And it has an integer value. We can make it bigger again. We can change the font. So it's really not that difficult. So you're probably used to this by now. Okay. Again, if I Control R, I can just, increase this and decrease it however I like. So this can be any number. I can even, type something here. Okay, how do I set a minimum and a maximum for this spin box? And then how do I print stuff whenever it's changed? So these are our next two goals. The first thing we're going to do is in my constructor. So everything I write in the constructor is things that I am initializing. So as soon as I launch the app, I want these to be applied. I want the combo box to be not visible. I want the combo box to have these items. I want to connect the clicked and the button to this function. So this is everything in the init function. The others are things that happen when certain events happen. So when a button is clicked, I want to do X. When the checkbox is checked, I want to do Y. So that's really what we're doing. So the spin box. So let's see the spin box. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is self.spin. Okay, spin box dot set minimum to be 1, and then self.spinbox dot set maximum to be 10. Okay, and yeah, that's the very first thing we're going to do. Let's run it. Okay, the minimum is 1, and I go up, I can't go beyond 10. Okay, what's the next thing we're going to do? Next thing we're going to do is self.valueChanged.connect. So in this case, when the value is changed, I want to connect it to a function called spinChanged, or you can call these functions anything, by the way, although you probably knew that. So def spinChanged, and what we're going to do here, we're going to print the following. So what we're going to print actually is the current value and then actually retrieve the current value. So we're going to do self.spinbox.value. What this returns is actually an integer, so we need to cast this into a string. And here we go. So here's our str. Now we should be done with our mini application. So okay. Main window object has no value. Okay, what have I done? Let me just check. Okay, self.valueChange. So this should be spin box. Apologies for that. Okay, so I change it to 2. Current value is 2. Every time I change it, it's something else. I can even directly type. So 7, 3, and so on. So that's really our first application. We learned multiple different types of attributes that are associated with each of these different widgets. So the spin box has, a minimum and a maximum value. It has a value changed. A combo box has a current index changed. A checkbox has a checked or state changed, and so on. So there are multiple attributes associated with each of these. I really hope this video was useful, so please let me know if it was. Please let me know about other different widgets in PyQt5 that you'd like to see videos on. I do have a PyQt5 playlist, feel free to check it out. And yeah, that's really it for this video. See you in the next one. Bye bye.